Oh yeah. They'll sell the idea of the league's against us. They keep reminding me again and again, these Patriots do, of the old 70s Raiders, and anything that happened to the 70s Raiders, they would take as, it's us against the world, no matter what. Even if the referee made like a clean holding call against them, they'd be like, you guys are just trying to cheat us out of a game, and they would use that anger to fuel them. I think the Patriots would be the same way. They'll be like, hey, whatever happens, it's us against the world, no matter what it is. And, hey, it works. It's worked for them since Belichick came, to join that team, and it's, if it's been working for, as long as it has now, 10, 15 years, keep doing it.
When you look at New England, they obviously have Brady, but they don't have a lot of outside weapons. Do you think that's going to be a problem for them? And if not, how do they kind of combat the fact that they don't really have a stud number one wide receiver?
The thing they have to do is, when you look at their vertical numbers and their stretch vertical numbers, that's production on downfield passes. Brady's numbers there were, if you're talking like on a per-play basis, he's bottom third of the league. He just doesn't have the gun anymore. So what you have to do is throw a lot of short passes, run the ball effectively, and then you play call your receivers open. Because Brandon LaFell would have been their vertical target, but he's out, so they really don't have anybody who's going to be their prime guy. But then look for opportunities in coverage. They say, okay, well, we can, we get you to play up a certain way on defense, we'll have this open, or we can try this. So it's rather they're going to pick their spots. The thing is, though, most quarterbacks, when you take away their vertical passes, they'll get really impatient and eventually just start forcing passes into coverage. If you give dink and dunk passes to Brady, he'll just take them all day long. He doesn't care. So if a team doesn't give them vertical passes, he doesn't mind going 13 plays to go downfield.
What's New England's defense like nowadays? It seems that they lost Revis. Obviously there's a big loss there, even though I don't think he got the same praise or hoopla that he did in his other stops, specifically the Jets, obviously. But who are they defensively now?
It's tough because they're still about they kind of remind me of the early Patriots where they had some good players, but it was more the system, more the play calling. Because the thing about Belichick, no matter what he's done, when he's had great players, he's been able to highlight them. But even when he hasn't had great players, what his defenses are very creative. So we're going to find ways to do things where we can use our play calling to impact your offense. We're not just going to react to what you do to us. We're going to make you react. But also, his defenses are so good at being where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. That's one of the biggest things on defense is if you have players in the positions that they are supposed to be in when they're supposed to be there, you can just eliminate percentage chances for the offense. So that's what this defense, I think, is going to be this year, is a really heavy emphasis on we don't make mistakes, we don't make errors. We're going to make a few plays against you, but we may not have a lot of talent, but you're not going to be able to just beat us because of our mistakes. You're going to have to find ways to beat us.
All right, Pittsburgh, obviously a lot of firepower on offense. They'll miss a lot of that, though. Two key players on offense tonight. Can they keep up with New England without Bell and Bryant?
Yeah, and third, actually, if you count Pouncey being out with the injury. So they've got, the core of their offensive line is hurting, too. The thing about them is that when you've got Antonio, best wide receiver in the NFL, an insane set of metrics. You can measure his production any way you want. Vertical passes, short passes, against different levels of competition. They're just dominant numbers across the board. So they still have him. They still have Marcus Wheaton, and they're sold that Wheaton's going to be like this breakout guy. His numbers weren't good last year, but Pittsburgh keeps talking about, hey, he's our breakout player, and he's got a good matchup this week, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Wheaton have a big game. And the thing is, they've got a really good offensive line, and Williams is not a very good back. D'Angelo Williams is not a breakaway guy by any stretch anymore, but if you give running backs good blocking and you've got the kind of passing game that they can have, even with just Wheaton and Brown, I think they could still hit some big. They could keep up in the shootout. Big caveat is, what's the weather going to be like? Because if it's bad weather, this can be an entirely different game.
I know there's bad weather here in New Jersey. We'll see what it is about 8 hours up the road there, or 7 hours up the road there in Foxborough. Casey Joyner's with us. New England and Pittsburgh kicks it all off, but there's some really good games on Sunday we're going to dive into as well. Let's start with Green Bay and Chicago inside the division there. And you look at Green Bay losing Jordy Nelson. Did they miss a beat because of that, or is Rodgers that good that we'll just have another receiver that you might not have ever heard of step up and become a star player?
They'll miss a beat because Nelson was fourth in the league in targets last year, and he was second in vertical yards, vertical touchdowns, stretch vertical yards, and stretch vertical touchdowns. Top two in all four of those categories. He's one of the best vertical targets in the league. Devontae Adams is not up to that caliber. He's not quite that good. In fact, numbers last year were about half as good on a per-play basis as Nelson. But he's going to close that gap. And they've got Randall Cobb. They brought back James Jones, who's a great fit for that offense and knows that system. I have a feeling he might be a guy who is a bigger contributor than people are thinking. And they even can go to their tight ends today. They don't have, they've got no names at tight ends, but Chicago does a terrible job at covering, and Chicago's going to have probably a rookie strong safety too, and you know that Aaron Rodgers is going to target that matchup. So I think they're still going to get high-quality production, maybe not what they did last year, but pretty darn close, and a heavy dose of Eddie Lacy.
Yeah, and on the other side, of course, you got Cutler, Forte, Alshon Jeffrey. They still got some pieces over there, but without Trestman, and now you go to Fox, what is their offense going to look like?
I'm curious about if Cutler's going to play the whole season in that offense, because John Fox is not going to accept the idea of somebody who's going to, if he sees sulking from his quarterback, he'll go somewhere else. I think they're going to be a power running team. They're going to move a lot of receptions from what Forte had last year. They're going to move it more to the ground game. They're going that's going to be their forte, no pun intended. I wouldn't be surprised to see them get the backups in there, the backup running backs, and give them more carries than maybe people were thinking they're going to get. But I think that offense is going to be a lot different offense than what it was. But if Cutler starts forcing a lot of passes into coverage, or if he starts making foolish mistakes and things, I'm be surprised to see Chicago change quarterbacks.
KC with Andy Reid, going on the road, taking on Houston, and obviously Bill O'Brien and the Texans featured on Hard Knocks, and you saw their story. They're going to be without Arian Foster. They've got Hoyer playing quarterback. I like the Chiefs. I actually picked them to win the West out there. I think Andy in year 3 gets them to a division championship, but can they go on the road and knock off Houston?
I've got them. We do some ESPN picks every week. You can check it out on ESPN.com. We do weekly picks, and I did pick Kansas City to win that game. I think the big difference for Kansas City is Jeremy Maclin is a vertical threat, and people were like, "Oh, Andy Reid doesn't throw the ball deep anymore because Alex Smith." It's not Alex Smith. He trusts Alex Smith to throw the football. It's just last year they don't have anybody who can go get open deep. You look at Maclin. Philadelphia fans remember he's a great vertical threat, a really good one, a lot better than what Kansas City had last year when they didn't throw any touchdown passes to the receivers. He changes the dynamic of their offense, and because Smith is a better quarterback than Hoyer, a much better quarterback than Hoyer by a factor, not just by a small margin, I think Kansas City wins that game.
Casey Joyner's with us. We're looking at Week 1 of the NFL schedule, highlighting some of the key games out there. How about Indy at Buffalo? A lot of people like Buffalo. They got great skill, but no quarterback play, really. They're very good on defense. Could this be a trap Week 1 game for Indianapolis?
I think it could be. I've got the Colts winning the game. I definitely think it could be because Buffalo's defense is that good. They can rush the passer. They've got guys who can cover, although Darby's been kind of hit and miss in coverage, and you know that Indianapolis is going to go after him. Problem for Buffalo is McCoy's a bit banged up. They say he's going to play, but still he's banged up, and if he's not at 100%, that could be trouble. The Colts defense is not that good, but again, are you going to let Tyrod Taylor drop back and throw the football a lot? I don't think that happens. I think he could still be a super pick in some ways in in the daily fantasy leagues, but I think when you're looking at a matchup like this, it's still the difference between Luck and Taylor is so great. I think it more than makes up for the difference between the Bills defense and the Colts defense. So I got Indianapolis winning that one.
Okay, they're going to go on the road, Indy, in that game. Other good games. There's a lot of good ones this first one. You got Seattle playing Nick Foles in St. Louis. You also have the Saints with Breeze going to Arizona, a playoff team from a year ago. You've got Detroit, a team that always seems like they're right there against San Diego, a team that made the playoffs with Rivers. But I want to look at the Baltimore-Denver game and take a look at what Denver, because with Manning, this could be the last year we see him. And Baltimore always seems to be right there. Does Denver get off to a good start with a win against Baltimore, or is this a tough Baltimore team to go on the road and knock off Manning in possibly his final year?
It's a tough Baltimore team, but the problem for them is Brashad Perriman's out, and they brought Perriman in to replace Torrey Smith, and Torrey Smith was their vertical threat and a really good one, and Perriman had the chops to be a good vertical threat, but he's not going to be out there. So now they've got no names at receiver. I don't think they have a decent vertical threat. I mean, Steve Smith's the best wide out, and he's a dink and dunk pass catcher now. And you're going up against the Denver defense that all the Denver cornerbacks are cornerbacks by a color grading system. Red being really tough, yellow being okay, green being a favorable matchup for the offense. All of the Denver quarterbacks rated as red rated. They're top-notch guys. So there's not a favorable matchup for Baltimore anywhere in the passing game. And Baltimore's defense has some favorable matchups for Denver. Denver's going to lean on the run game a whole lot more this year, but I just don't think Baltimore has the offensive firepower to win, even if this game were at Baltimore, because it's in Denver. Yeah, I think Denver wins this probably by 10 points.
I want to dive into New York and Dallas a little bit here. Dallas, obviously, a lot of people like them still. They got the great offensive line. They lose Murray. They got great receivers out there. Romo obviously puts up great numbers. He's a 35-10 guy, it seems like. But the Giants seem like they're a disaster. A lot of problems on the defensive side of the ball. When you look at Dallas, though, playing at home on Sunday night, is this a game that is, because it's a division that's closer, do you think that Dallas just has way more talent than New York?
I think it's going to be a real close game. It's going to be a shootout. I'm picking Dallas because when in doubt, pick the home team, but Dallas lost Orlando Scandrick, and their secondary last year, if you look at them in vertical and stretch vertical passes, they rank in the bottom half of the league in both those categories. They didn't face a lot of those passes because the offense was able to protect them. It's not going to happen this year. The offense isn't going to be able to protect that defense, so the Giants are going to go pass first. The last half of the season, last year, Eli Manning tied with Drew Brees for the most passes in the league. So the Giants are going to pass heavy, go after Dallas' secondary. Dallas is going to turn around and go after the Giants' secondary, and it's going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a 35-31 game.
Can you kind of expand a little bit more on that? Because I've kind of talked about this too, is that last year, Casey, Murray goes for 1,800-plus yards. Now, I don't know whether or not they're going to have one guy, two guys, or three guys. I can't imagine them getting 1,800 yards. If you give them 1,200 yards, that's still 600 yards they are out on offense at the running back position. Think about how many first downs that is that they're losing potentially from the running game. And I think it's a good point you make is their offense going to be able to sustain enough to keep that defense, which is okay, probably better than we gave them credit for, but that's a lot of yards that they're losing in the running game.
Yep, they kind of remind me, I'm going to go real old school here, the 70s Dallas Cowboys, where the 70s Cowboys started the decade, they had real good running backs. In the middle of the decade, they went to a committee situation. They were like, well, we've got good blocking, that's good enough, that can carry our offense. And they were good enough to get to a Super Bowl, and they were good enough to get deep in the playoffs, but they really didn't get back to championship form until they got Tony Dorsett, and suddenly the running game was big. You can't just have good blocking. You've got to have some good skill at the running back position. They have some players who can do fairly well, but man, if you're rotating people in and out, the committee situation I think it limits all of their running backs' value. And I think you're right. They're going to lose. It may be 600 yards, it may be 300, maybe 400, whatever it is. They're not going to equal last year's production probably out of that position. And if they lose that many yards, that is a lot of first downs. And now you're not protecting the defense. And if you're not protecting the defense, now your offense has to throw the ball more. Now, hey, Tony Romo, good Tony shows up most of the time, but bad Tony's still there. He's gonna, it's gonna be kind of like that DirecTV commercial. You're gonna see bad Tony come out every so often, and when that happens, turns a couple wins into a couple losses. Now you're not a 12-4 division winner. You're a 10-6 wild card team.
That's a great point. Casey Joyner, ESPN.com. He likes Dallas in that game, as do I. Let's go to Philadelphia and Atlanta. I know the Falcons. Chip Kelly brought it up today. Ryan, Julio Jones, Roddy White, they still have some weapons. They got problems on the offensive line. I couldn't tell you who's going to run the football for them. But they were a team that a lot of people thought last year they would make a comeback from where they were a year ago. That didn't happen. Is this an Atlanta team that the Eagles should be worried about?
They've got Freeman and they've got Tevin Coleman. And Tevin Coleman was a breakout back last year. I mean, he played for Indiana, and people didn't really hear about him and things, but he had as good a numbers as Melvin Gordon in a lot of ways for a team that wasn't nearly as good. So they've got some skill there, but I just, that they're still, Julio Jones is really good, but he can be hit or miss. It's depending on the situation. Right now, it looks healthy and things, so he should be fine there. But Matt Ryan still makes a little too many bad decisions to be in the quarterback. The running game is not quite as good as it was. I mean, this is not a bad team. But if Philadelphia gets its offense going the way it can, and I think that they will against the Atlanta defense because Quinn hasn't turned the Atlanta defense around yet, if that happens and Philadelphia plays that pace football, as good as Atlanta can be talent-wise, I really don't think they could keep up. So I think it's a matter of if Chip Kelly gets things going in this game, I don't think Atlanta's going to be in a position to be able to keep up.
And that's one area, though, I want to ask you about. The Eagles gave up the X plays last year. I think the number was 40. I mean, they were just getting burned. Obviously, with Fletcher and Williams, it seemed like week in and week out. Maxwell and Carroll against Jones and White. What do you like in that matchup?
I'm like, look, White's banged up a little bit, and when you look at his metrics last year, he's not nearly as productive as he was in past years. I don't think he's the same receiver. I think he's taken the Larry Fitzgerald route to, he was a great receiver who's now a good dink and dunk receiver and a quality pass catcher, but not somebody who's going to be as much of an impact player. So if you've just got to stop Jones, it's a big thing you have Jones, but we've been talking in the offseason about how the Eagles, their defense is really now predicated on making picks. So if Jones goes out and gets, and gets 120 yards receiving, he puts up a good day, that's great. But if the Eagles, say, pick off one pass going his way, I think that as much as offsets most of his production. I mean, that's how important turnovers can be. So I think the big thing for Philadelphia's defense isn't if they're going to give up some big plays, because when you're a Chip Kelly defense, if your offense is playing at the pace it's playing, you're going to give up some big plays. It's can you make those big plays? Can you get the sacks? Can you get the turnovers? And I think both of those categories they're going to do well this year, and I think this game. So I'm looking for Philadelphia to make some plays and out big play Atlanta, as it were.
Hey, last year, I don't know how you take this into account, but the Eagles had 3 special teams touchdowns, numerous defensive touchdowns. Is this a team that is an opportunistic defense again this year? Do you look at them as a team again that will be, generating points from their defense and special teams?
I think a lot of it comes down to, like, you hear people who've played for, say, Lovie Smith, the Humans of the Rams. They say one of the reasons that Rams defense was such an impact defense is he coached it. And it was like, we're not really going to, we don't want to just get a turnover. We want to turn it into a big play. We want to be a big play defense. Because, remember, football is the only game where the defense can score. And every other sport, the defense can't score. In football, it can. And there are coaches who coach that up. And that's a Chip Kelly specialty, I think, as well, is that he wants to be that kind of impact defense. He wants the big play. He wants the sack. He wants the interception, because he figures that he's playing a higher percentage brand of offense than you are if he's getting those big plays and he's not giving them up. So I look for Philadelphia to be that kind of defense that aims to get that. Do they get quite as many as last year? I don't know. They look like they got more than their share last year. But even if they cut their touchdowns in half on returns and defensive returns and special teams returns, they're still going to be in the upper half of the league in that category, and they're still going to be an impact defense. So unless they fall apart, I think this is still a defense that's going to put up some points.
Big night for a guy like Murray against Falcons. Is this a team that you can run the ball on?
Yeah, but does he get 60% of the carries, or does he get 75? It's I'm like in daily fantasy leagues, I'm telling people to play kind of cautious and things. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see triple-digit numbers. I don't, I could see 110 yards or something. I don't think it's going to be a big 170-yard game, but I could see triple-digit numbers, sure.
All right, obviously Eagles-Falcons. That game's not till Monday night here on 97.3 ESPN. The coverage starts at 6 o'clock. It'll be Sam Bradford's debut. How do you envision Sam Bradford coming out against this Falcons secondary?
Well, a few weeks ago, over the past few weeks, I should say, the people have looked at Sam Bradford and said, oh, wow, this guy was a great quarterback. It's like, he was a great quarterback in college. He was Rookie of the Year, so he was pretty good in the NFL at some points, too. I mean, it's not like, he's kind of like, again, going old school Jim Plunkett, where, hey, he was great at one time and people forgot about it, and suddenly he's becoming great again, and it shouldn't be a new thing. This is who Sam Bradford is. If you protect him and you put him in an offense that has talent around him, I mean, he can be a top 5 quarterback. The reason he was the first pick in the draft years ago, he could be a top 5 quarterback. So I think that process starts in this game. I think he puts up some terrific numbers, and and again, the Eagles, their future is tied to if he stays healthy. Because if he stays healthy, they could be Super Bowl bound.
All right, Casey Joyner, everybody, here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. And, of course, every Thursday we'll break down the top NFL games. And it sounds as if you like Philadelphia in that game, even on the road. Atlanta's a tough place to play. They've been way better at home than they are on the road.
Yeah, they are way better at home. I like where the Eagles are offensively. I like their ability to dictate the pace. And Atlanta, they're breaking in new coach. They're changes in the backfield. They got a lot of personnel changes, and then I think they'll be. If this game were in Week 10, might be a different story. I think in Week 1, Philadelphia is more ready to get out to a quick start than Atlanta is.
I will ask you on opening night tonight, Casey, who is your Super Bowl pick?
My Super Bowl pick, I'd love to say it's the Eagles. I could probably pick them to go from the hey, I've vacillated on this because Pittsburgh was my Super Bowl pick until they started getting those injuries. So I probably have Green Bay winning the whole thing. I could pick the Eagles to win the NFC, but I think Green Bay is probably going to win the whole thing, assuming they don't get any other injuries. I think they just have more talent than everybody else. I think it might be them and the Steelers in the Super Bowl, and Green Bay takes that win.
Okay, that's his pick there, and we'll see how it materializes. Next week we'll be going over week 2 of the NFL schedule, but tonight it's the Steelers and the Patriots here on 97.3. All right, bud, always a pleasure.
Hey, appreciate it, man.